Allow me just for a moment as I move on my questions to indicate that I am shocked and baffled the way some in the right-wing media and some of our friends on the other side show such contempt for the Department of Justice and the FBI and so much skepticism or mistrust of the Russian government. Let me briefly review for the record. The FBI and DOJ brought to justice and put away Timothy McVeigh, domestic terrorist who killed 168 Americans, Klansmen who murdered civil rights workers Goodman, Cheney, and Swerner, the Unabomber, terrorists who bombed U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, organized crime family kingpins, the murderer assassinated Medgar Evers, Pan Am 103 bombing, Soviet diplomat that had a spy ring during World War II, Aldra Ames, Richard Hansen, Alger Hiss, and others for espionage, World Trade Center bombing in 1993, TWA 847 hijacking, Lindbergh kidnapping, Beltway snipers, Klansmen who killed 4 little girls in the 16th Street church in Birmingham. And of course, on the other hand, the Russians are known for shooting down a civilian airline, KAL-007, killing 269 passengers and crew, annexing Crimea and invading Ukraine, killing journalists, propping up Assad, the butcher of Damascus, building the Berlin Wall, imposing an Iron Curtain against freedom, and committing cyber theft and conspiring and doing a sabotage of the American presidential election in 2016. Perhaps our friends on the other side of the aisle can show more respect for the FBI and the DOJ.
So that's your representative in the 18th Congressional District in Houston, Sheila Lee Jackson. And I'm perplexed, I'm puzzled, I'm flabbergasted, words I don't normally use, because this sister is caping for the Alphabet Boys, aka the FBI, which I'm confused because I didn't know the FBI was a friend to black people in the black community, right? If any group of people in this country has more reason to be don't tread on me and not trust the government, you would think it would be black Americans. Now, I get it, the same institution, the system that denied us opportunities, that blocked us from access to wealth and capital, is the same institution that gave it to us, i.e. the government. But you can't erase all the effed up things that were done in the name of the FBI and against black people, simply out of political motivation because you don't like Trump's administration. Think about that. I just watched a Roland Martin segment where he was talking about the whole thing that is the basis of this conversation is while 2 months ago the FBI labeled black protesters and Black Lives Matter, who I'm not a fan of, as identity extremists and they're a threat to government and law enforcement. Right? Despite all the tiki torches and all the white dudes burning down UC Berkeley because they don't like conservative speaking, they label black protesters as a threat. Not the tiki torch dudes, not the Antifa people, but Black Lives Matter. When we know for a fact that a lot of the stuff that happens with Black Lives Matter that are violent, it comes from these Antifa, anarchists, communist mofos who come to these cities where people are peacefully protesting and they pop shit off. But those people are on the list. The FBI, who Sheila Lee Jackson is caping for in this little segment, little clip, that's who the FBI chooses to put on their list. And not even 2 months ago. And 2 months later, because politically it makes her look good or feel good, she's going to come at the news media and Trump's administration for questioning the legitimacy of the FBI, even though there's evidence that many of these people in the investigation of the Trump Russia thing, we've seen the emails, we've seen the text messages, we see that many of these people were Clinton donors. Some of these people did not want Trump to be president. All that has been revealed. The media's not paying attention to that, over covering that up, but I guess you could say Trump has a reason to not trust them or not validate their arguments. It was one thing that was funny is when I'm watching the news and I'm watching the mainstream media and they're saying, and this is the thing too, because it's Democrats and Republicans, right? You got 17 different organizations saying, yeah, Russia has something to do with it, right? And the mainstream media is hitting you with the whole, well, you don't trust them? You don't trust them? Like, no, I don't. Their word isn't bond. One of my favorite movies, Enemy of the State, one of my favorite Will Smith movies, they showed us what Eric Snowden revealed a few years ago with the NSA and how they're spying on American people and watching you through your tablets, your laptops, your computers, and doing all types of weird shit illegally. We already knew that, but he made it easy as possible to say, yo, this is what they're doing to the American people. They got Microsoft and Verizon and all the other companies selling you information and whatnot by force. But that's what they're doing. So I don't understand this idea of trusting the government when we, more than anybody on this planet, has more reason to not trust their government. You have a person who represents a black districts being their number one cheerleader. We know what the FBI did to Dr. King, to Malcolm X, to the Black Panthers. We know they infused themselves into those movements. They're in every organization, every movement, obviously. That's their job. But they were used to destroy and divide and dismantle those movements. We know that the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, moist ass, started that whole thing attacking black movements. Under the leadership of Congressman Kennedy, he's the reason why they were allowed to tap Dr. King's phone. Yes, we all talk about how he made the phone call, got him out of jail, but he was the reason why Dr. King got arrested in the first place. He gave the FBI the permission to tap his phones. We don't talk about that. So I'm just puzzled how Sheila Lee Jackson is caping for the FBI, knowing damn well that the black community and the FBI don't have a good history. Where does this come from? How do you do that? Like, you got to be beyond the politics of that. Again, if any group on this planet is to not trust the government or their entities or situations, when we saw what happened with the IRS, where they were targeting conservative groups, denying them their 501(c)(3) statuses, things of that nature. Like, these are people. We know, hell, the CIA, we know what they did with drugs in the black community. The FBI, we know what they did with guns in the community, in their false flag situations and stuff like that. We know they do all this stuff. So why are we the voice? There's a lot of arguments that other people can make that we can't. And this is an argument that we should not be making. Unless you work for them, you are in it, I can understand that. But if you're representing a district of people who historically have been attacked or infiltrated or bothered by, you shouldn't be doing that. It just doesn't make sense to me. But we're going to politicize it, and it makes her feel good, and she's going to get her black girl magic moment because she's coming at the Trump administration despite the fact that black people have beef with the FBI just like he does. Historically, more of an argument, more of a beef. How many of the people we see on YouTube, Boyce, Tariq, Umar, all these people, after the dude shot the cops in Dallas, Boyce talked about cars sitting in front of his house that had never been there before. Tariq did the video showing the FBI coming to his house, interviewing him because the dude who shot the people followed him or sent him an email. Like, come on. I just don't understand black people caping for the FBI. I just don't. It don't make sense to me. Especially when you have a constituency of people who just got labeled extremists by the same institution you're bringing up. Oh, they did this with the Timothy McVeigh. They did that. Bring up all the other stuff that they did to black community. Don't just stop there. Tell the whole story. Of course, that's their job. They're supposed to protect American citizens on American soil. But what have they done to the black community specifically that you want to ignore or don't want to bring up right now because it's not politically expedient for you to do so? Talk about that, Miss Sheila Lee Jackson.
Black identity extremist. That's the label an internal report by the FBI's Counterterrorism Division is giving to black activists around the country. The report says they pose a growing threat of premeditated violence against law enforcement in response to police brutality. Former government officials and legal experts say no such movement exists, and this is an attempt by the FBI and the Donald Trump administration to find an equivalent threat to white supremacists and silence black activists. Joining us now by phone from Washington is the article's co-author, Sharon.
Again, I get it, it's his administration, it's his presidency, but you can't have two narratives be true at the same time. try to say that Trump and his administration is not respecting the FBI, well, not his administration, but his cabinet or his followers or the right-wing media, but then turn around and blame him for what's going on with the FBI. Like, that doesn't make sense. Again, we know that the FBI did not want him to win. They were doing a little dirty things with Crooked Hillary in order to not get him elected, especially with the Russia probe and all that other stuff. It's funny that the more you dig into Trump's situation with Russia, you find out more information about Hillary Clinton and who hired the Russians to get information on Trump as well. So that shit is just hilarious. But again, I remember one thing I thought was crazy is when Trump had said that we got killers too, and that illustrated something different to me, because it's like, the Democrats hate him, right? And then half of his own party hate him, right? Those who Republicans or conservatives would call to as rhinos, or the establishment types like the John McCain's, the Warhawk, who, because he has brain cancers and he's voted against a couple bills that Trump wanted, the Democrats are loving him now, despite the fact that he's a Warhawk, and I'm sure he probably would rather have Hillary won. But even, I understand his beef with Trump, because Trump had made that statement about the POW situation, which, again, like, Trump has said things that people don't say, it's not politically correct, but I've had conversations with black vets, and they felt the same way. Like, yo, you got captured, and we don't respect that. Or the fact that you got captured and you were a POW for years, but your father was a top-ranking general. Like, they weren't going to do anything to you, because that would have been like World War III had anything like that happen. So it was like, you don't say those things publicly, you don't voice that, and it definitely doesn't sound right coming from somebody like Trump, who's dodged going to war like 5 different times. But the reality is there are people that do feel that way. So he's saying things that you don't say, but people do feel it, and they do talk about it. But another thing that Trump had said was when he was doing an interview, and he was talking about Russia, and he's like, the interview was like, they kill people, and he's like, Trump was like, we kill people too. And I love the way the reaction of the patriarchal right-wingers were, their butt was itching, because it's like, how dare you say that? And that's a reality, that we do got killers too. We might not do it in the manner that the Russians do it, right? Like, if they have a defector, they have somebody they don't like, they might put a bomb under his, car, or you might have a gas leak. But what do? When we want to kill American citizens abroad, we drone strike them and kill their whole family. So it's like, I thought that was interesting. Like, even Ben Shapiro was trying to argue against that. And I'm like, dude, America has killed and taken out leaders often. We do it under a different guise. We call it regime change. We say they were gassing their own people, but we kill other people all the damn time. So get the freak out of here with that nonsense. But that's when you see stuff like that, and you have the liberals, who are usually supposedly against all that war stuff, except for when Barack Obama was in office, or maybe even Hillary Clinton, because she was, I think, more of a war hawk than Trump will ever be. And that's why I think many of the establishment Republicans would rather have Hillary in office, because they know they're about to go overseas and blow some shit up and get some, and destabilize and rebuild and get some bread. But I think that's one element of Trump's administration that he has bring to light, where you see a lot of when you see both parties going at you, there's something to step back and think about on certain issues, especially when it's issues that black people can look back and say, yeah. Again, when Bush was president, the left would have went in his ass over going to Iraq and going to other countries and getting in other people's business. They were quiet and silent during Obama's years, absolutely. But I like how they tried to play the patriarchal game too with those establishment Republicans, when Trump straight up said, like, yo, we got killers too. We do the same thing that Russia does and every other country does. We're no different. But apparently those a lot of conservatives want to have that intellectual dishonesty or cognitive dissonance when it comes to that topic of, every war we've been in ain't been about protecting America or protecting American citizens. Sometimes we in shit that ain't got nothing to do with us. Now, when it comes to war, I am more libertarian, but I don't believe in going around and mess with people, but I'm not delusional. You don't become a superpower. You don't become the #1 country without pulling out your mushroom tip and doing shit to other countries. Like, that's just a reality. You don't get to be a superpower without raping and pillaging other places. That's just fact. So, I mean, it is what it is. But I don't know. I think it's just weird how we're having two arguments on the on the front. Like, what you look at black media, they're on the side of the FBI when it comes to the Trump administration. And again, you heard all those statements, 16 different agencies and all this other stuff. One thing that was funny was when the CIA, right? Because Obama used his anti-war stance to get elected, and it worked. They gave him a peace prize for it, right? And he was threatening to, he was threatening to punish or prosecute all the people from Bush's administration that was doing the torturing and all that illegal stuff, right? The waterboarding, all that. And members of the CIA were tapping Senator Dianne Feinstein's computers and whatnot. I mean, they hacked him or whatever to look and see, because she was on the head of that organization, right? So you have a government agency illegally going into a congresswoman's her computer to find out what information they can find out to see what's going to happen to them. And these same people, these same politicians have no problem voting for bills like that give those same entities the ability to do that to us, right? They don't care if they hack our phones and our emails and stuff like that, but the moment they do that to them, they feel some type of way. Dianne Feinstein flipped out when she found out that they were doing that to her, but she signed on for legislation and things like that, that those, the FBI, the CIA, well, the CIA isn't supposed to work on American soil. The FBI is not supposed to work on domestic soil, but we know that both happens, right? It is what it is. But that's just my video. I just think it's weird that we have a black senator caping for the FBI when we know historically that the FBI has not been a friend to the black people or any other government agency at that, right? I mean, there's hundreds of videos you can look. I might link a few of the informants and the shit that they did to the Black Panthers, the shit that they did to Dr. King. It's crazy. So, Sheila Lee Jackson, you brought up a couple good things that the FBI did, but you missed a lot of stuff that they did specifically that directly affected the black community. And that just doesn't make sense to me, being that you represent a large district of black people. I don't get that.
Domestic terror investigations.
It really sends a message that it's open season on black activists.
This is Karen Bass, a representative from California who 2 weeks ago grilled Jeff Sessions on the existence of black identity extremists.
I'm aware that there are groups that do have an extraordinary commitment to their racial identity, and some have transformed themselves even into violent activists.
Are you aware of white organizations that do this as well?
Yes, but it's not coming to me at this moment.
Not coming to you?
Representative Bass also questioned FBI Director Christopher Wray about the BIE label and seemed to find very little answers about why it exists.
One of the most important questions we asked him is, how did you even come up with that term? And I mean, and basically he said that people gathered newspapers and they kind of just threw it all together. There is no basis for that.
Black lawmakers and activists have every reason to believe this is a continuation of old tactics from the J. Edgar Hoover era of the FBI. Hoover's surveillance and subversion strategy, called COINTELPRO, had adverse effects on black activists and their social justice campaigns. The feds wiretapped and sought to intimidate Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. at the height of his influence.
We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality.
Information obtained from an FBI informant helped Chicago police carry out a bloody raid in 1969. The victims? Black Panther Party activists Fred Hampton and Mark Clark.
In December, police raided Black Panther headquarters in Chicago and Los Angeles. The officers had search warrants and raided just before dawn.
Many still call the raid an assassination.
This was an instance of the police going far beyond anything that was required to deal with that situation.
This is why several civil rights organizations have filed Freedom of Information Act requests, both with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, in order to learn to what extent these agencies are targeting black activists.
Folks are being surveilled because of their identity, because they're black. We have a number of emails that show agencies particularly surveilling folks' social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram accounts, using particular hashtags to target people. This surveillance is not some conspiracy. This is real and this is happening.
Since the BIE document became public, groups such as the NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, and even black police officers have come out against the term. But ultimately, opponents of the black identity extremist term say there's only one solution: to trash the document entirely.
And all these books, you know, and so they said, well, we're gonna have to call the FBI. It's like, whoa, the FBI? Why? I says, well, that's what we do in situations like this. And that's what they did. They called the FBI. And the FBI came to the airport. TSA and airport security escorted me upstairs, put me in a room. And this FBI agent came in the room and began to interrogate me. But he had this book. He was going through this book, and then he'd ask me questions. He'd look in the book and ask me more questions. And this interrogation went on for hours. And I finally worked up the nerve to say, you know, am I under arrest? And he said, no, we're just asking questions here. And I said, well, does that mean I can leave? He said, yeah, you can leave. And so that's what I did. I left. I found another flight. I went to Des Moines. I bought the car, drove it back, dropped the books off, and went back to work. And I didn't think much more about it. I mean, I thought it was bizarre, but I grew up black in Mississippi, and so you get used to the bizarre. And I don't think about it anymore until one day I'm talking with my boss, and she says, Curtis, we have a problem. And I said, okay, what kind of problem do we have? She said, well, it's come to my attention that you're a felon, and we can't allow felons to teach at the university. A felon? Wait a minute. Like, this is the classic WTF moment for me, right? I don't know what's going on, and she doesn't either, but she says, I think you should call the FBI, and that's what I do. I call the FBI, I tell them who I am, and you know why I'm calling, and they look me up on their system, and the woman I'm talking to says, yeah, it says you're a felon. I said, well, what did I do? She said, I don't know. I said, when did I do it? She said, I don't know. I said, where did I do it? She said, I don't know. In fact, I don't have any more information. Maybe if you call the U.S. Attorney's Office, they can give you more information. So she gave me the number to the U.S. Attorney's Office. I called them. They looked me up in their system, and the person I spoke with said, yes, it says here you're a felon. And I asked the same set of questions and got the same exact set of answers. I don't know. So it literally takes me more than 2 years to get this felony removed from my record. And I came to understand that the felony was on my record because I had written a book about the Black Panther Party. And some of you may be familiar with the Black Panther Party. For those of you who are not, it was an organization that started in 1966 in Oakland, California, as an effort to prevent the police brutality and murder of black people. But it also organized around a range of other issues that were affecting the black community, like health care and housing and full employment and fairness in the courts. They wanted blacks to be tried by juries of their peers because to that point they were being tried by all whites. Well, while they were organizing around these issues, the press was vilifying them and demonizing them and telling lies about them. In fact, one of the lies is that it was just a group of black men who wanted to go out and kill white people. That's what they were about. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fact of the matter is the Black Panther Party, the majority of the people in the Black Panther Party were not men, they were women. And a few years after the party started, the majority of the leadership of the Black Panther Party were women. And so it just wasn't true that there's this group of black men going around killing white people. Another lie that's been told about this organization is that it was racist and anti-white and they just didn't like white people at all. Well, also not true, and I'll prove that to you. The Panthers would find out what the problems were in their communities and attempt to solve them. For example, they realized that children weren't learning in school, and they weren't learning because they were hungry. So they decided to feed the children. They were going to feed them before school, so they created these free breakfast programs. And the way they created these programs was to go to the grocery stores in their communities, ask the grocery store owners if they would donate milk and bread and eggs and meat and cereal, other things people eat for breakfast. And these store owners said yes, and they donated these items. And all over the country, and every city where there was a chapter of the Black Panther Party, and there was about 40, there was a free breakfast program. So it's not likely that these white business owners would donate to the Black Panther Party if they were actually racist. Another thing they did in the community to serve the people was they created free health clinics. And again, they went around and found out there were a range of health problems that needed to be attended to. Black people were rather poor, so they couldn't afford to go to doctors, couldn't afford to go to hospitals. So the Panthers went to hospitals and medical schools and asked the doctors and medical students whether they would come to the Black community and deal with some of these medical issues. And overwhelmingly, they said yes. So again, all over the country in cities wherever the Black Panther Party set up chapters, there were these free health clinics. Although they were being run by the Black Panther Party, they were peopled by white people. So I don't know how they could be racist and anti-white if their signature programs were actually being supported by fairly wealthy and often middle-class white people. One of the people who was very, very good at pulling individuals, white and others, into the Black Panther Party orbit was a guy by the name of Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was the leader of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. And he was a very eloquent speaker, and he was very persuasive. Fred Hampton could persuade people that there was actual injustice. And more importantly than that, he could persuade people that they should do something to combat that injustice. And so in addition to going to these hospitals and grocery stores and getting the things they needed for their programs, Fred Hampton also worked with other groups and organizations who were Latino, Asian, Native American, even large groups of poor whites who had moved up from the South or into Chicago from Appalachia. They would work with these organizations and set up the same kinds of programs in their communities. And they were very successful at this. But the government didn't like what they were doing. So in addition to vilifying and discrediting them in the press, it began to arrest its members and in very extreme cases, to kill its members. And that's exactly what happened to Fred Hampton. On December 4th, 1969, the Chicago Police Department, the Illinois State's Attorney's Office, burst into Fred Hampton's apartment at 4:30 in the morning while he and everybody else in there were asleep, and just began spraying the place with bullets. Wounded several people. There was a person guarding the door named Mark Clark. They shot him straight through the heart, and he died immediately. They make their way through the house to Fred Hampton's bedroom, find him there. He's asleep because he's been drugged, but he's asleep next to his girlfriend who's 8.5 months pregnant. And they grab Fred Hampton by his hair and shoot him in the back of the head at point blank range twice, killing him instantly. That's the end of Fred Hampton. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it about this organization that prompts such an irrational, over-the-top, and extreme response? That 40 years after the organization has died, a lowly professor like myself can be stopped in an airport, detained for hours, questioned, then labeled a felon for simply writing a book about the organization? Why does Fred Hampton have to pay with his life for simply organizing around issues that everybody, there's nothing wrong with feeding kids and taking care of sick people. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to be killed by the police. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it about this organization? And I'll tell you, the thing about this organization is that it was actually anti-racist. And it made a point to work with all people, whether it was upper and middle class whites, lower class whites, Asians, Latinos, Native Americans, anybody who wanted to help solve these problems, this organization was willing to work with them. And that was a problem. If this interracial organization was not effective, people would not have been so dead set against it. So it wasn't just Fred Hampton who had to pay. It wasn't just me who had to pay with being labeled a felon. You probably saw this a few weeks ago. Beyonce performed at the Super Bowl at the halftime show. And she and the women who were dancing with her dressed up in these black leather outfits, these black berets, and they were dressed that way to pay homage to the Black Panther Party. 2016 marks the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party, and they were trying to honor this community service organization. But what they got in return was a ton of hate mail. People all over the country are saying they are racist and anti-white, they're cop haters. Police officers have said that they don't want to give her the security she needs at her concerts. Mayors have said they don't want her in her town. Beyonce is racist. Beyonce. I mean, racy, maybe, but not racist. So we just have to keep asking ourselves, why are we told these stories about the Black Panther Party, and who benefits from us knowing these lies? So I want to encourage you